Homeless woman helps crying boy without knowing his millionaire father was watching. That afternoon, Daisy sat alone on a cold cement bench near the park. Her eyes stared blankly into the distance. She wore a worn-out hoodie, torn at the elbow, and old sneakers with thinning soles. Her jeans had faded to a color she no longer remembered. She wasn't thinking much about hunger. What troubled her more was where she'd sleep that night. The shelter closed early on Mondays, and it was already too late. Last night, she had wandered the streets until dawn. She didn't want to do that again, but it seemed like there weren't many options left. At that moment, across the street, a boy of about 6 ran playfully, his hands raised as he chased a flock of pigeons. Suddenly, he tripped over a tree root jutting out from the sidewalk and fell flat on his face. The sound of the impact was loud and clear. Daisy jumped to her feet without hesitation. She wasn't the only one who saw it happen, but she was the only one who stepped forward. The boy cried while rubbing his eyes, his forehead scraped, one shoelace completely undone. Daisy bent down, keeping a respectful distance, and gently asked how he was. Passers-by looked at her with wary eyes because she was dirty and disheveled, but the boy wasn't afraid at all. He looked up at her with tear-streaked cheeks. Daisy carefully brushed the dirt off his pants and asked if he was okay. He just nodded, still sobbing softly. Seeing that one shoelace was so tangled that he might trip again if he stood up, she said nothing, sat right down, gently took hold of his shoe, and tied it. The boy stopped crying, watching her intently. After finishing one shoe, Daisy moved on to the other, tying it with the same care, as if it was the most important task in the world. And in that moment, it truly was. Daisy didn't know that. Just a few meters away, inside a dark-colored car parked by the park, a man was watching. Danny, wearing a gray suit, had just stepped out of his car to look for his son after seeing him run too far ahead. When he saw the boy fall, his heart tightened. He was about to rush over but stopped when he noticed a homeless woman had gotten there first. At first he hesitated, but as he watched how she treated John, gently, without pity, without rushing, he decided to stay back and observe. John, his cheeks still damp, suddenly giggled when Daisy tied the last knot. She made a funny face that he simply couldn't resist laughing at. "Feeling better now?" she asked. He nodded and pointed to the car. "My dad's over there." Daisy turned, startled. Danny approached, tall, well-dressed, his face serious but not unfriendly. He crouched next to his son, quickly checking the scrape. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "No, she already fixed it," John said, pointing at Daisy. Daisy lowered her gaze, feeling she should leave. But before she could stand, Danny spoke. "Thank you for helping him." "It's nothing," she replied without meeting his eyes. "It is, very much so. Are you okay?" Daisy was surprised. She wasn't used to anyone asking her that. She mumbled something and was about to go, but John held her hand. "Are you leaving?" "I have to, kiddo." "Will you come back?" "I don't know. Sometimes I'm around here." John hugged her without hesitation. In that instant, Danny's chest tightened again. He asked, "Would you like something to eat? My treat?" "No need," Daisy shook her head. "Not out of pity, just to say thank you. We were going to have dinner nearby. Would you join us?" Daisy looked at her worn clothes, her scuffed shoes, her dirty hands. She felt out of place, but her stomach was empty. And more than that, she felt something different in his gaze, not seeing her as a burden, but as a person. "All right, but nothing expensive. Nothing." John jumped with joy, grabbing her hand like an old friend. Daisy smiled and walked with them toward the car. The diner was tucked into a quiet corner of the neighborhood. It served grilled sandwiches and hot soup. Daisy sat across from John, her hands trembling slightly. She noticed a few glances from other tables, but didn't care. The little boy in front of her, that's what mattered. John talked nonstop, about school, a neighbor's dog, and how he hated carrots. Daisy listened with a soft chuckle here and there. Danny sat quietly beside them, not interrupting. He just watched. It had been so long since he'd seen his son laugh like that. Since his wife passed, John had withdrawn, unwilling to connect with anyone, not even trained nannies. But here he was, sharing fries with a woman Danny had never met before today. Daisy kept her distance. She didn't ask personal questions, didn't try to impress. She just sat, eating quietly. A little lost, a little tired, but incredibly real. After the meal, Daisy stood to leave, but Danny stopped her with a question. "Where do you live?" "Nowhere permanent. I rotate between shelters in this area." He paused, then spoke carefully. "I know this might sound strange, but would you consider staying to help take care of John for a while?" Daisy froze. "You mean as a nanny?" "Not in the professional sense, just being around him. You've seen how he lights up around you." "You don't even know me." "But I know what I saw today, and that wasn't fake." Daisy looked at John, now finishing his ice cream, chocolate smeared around his mouth. She didn't answer right away. 1,000 questions swirled inside her, 1,000 fears. She looked at him more closely. He wasn't saying it just to be nice, but the fear inside her still lingered. "Listen, I have a past that's not exactly pretty. I've been homeless for years. I've done things I'm not proud of. I'm not the right person to take care of your child. Have you ever hurt anyone?" "No." "Ever stolen?" "Yes, but I haven't done that in a long time." "Then I don't care about the past. I care about what you do today." Daisy looked straight into his eyes, searching for any sign of mockery, but found none. "What would I have to do?" "Be with John in the afternoons, pick him up from school, take him to the park, play with him. Just like you already do, but with more structure. I'll take care of the rest." "You'll pay me?" "Yes." "A place to shower, clothes, a place to sleep?" "Yes." "And if one day I just leave?" "Then you leave, but I hope you'll at least try first." Daisy buried her face in her hands, her mind spinning. Too much trust, too much to lose for someone like her. "I need a day to think." "Take as long as you need, but know that John is waiting." And just like that, a simple dinner ended with an unnamed agreement. A beginning none of them knew would change everything. Danny's house sat in a quiet neighborhood in northern New Jersey, about a 30-minute drive from the city. The kind of place with trimmed lawns, half-drawn white curtains, and a glowing doorbell at night. From the outside, it looked like a page pulled from a lifestyle magazine. Daisy stepped through the front door carrying a single worn-out bag, everything she owned. The hardwood floors gleamed, a faint scent of lavender filled the air, and everything was so spotless it made her hesitate to take a step. An older woman, with her hair in a tight bun and a spotless gray apron, waited in the foyer. "You're Daisy?" she asked curtly. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Margaret, housekeeper here. Your room's at the end of the hallway next to the laundry area, private bathroom, not like the rooms upstairs, but clean." "Thank you." "No need to thank me. I'm not doing this out of charity." Daisy nodded, saying nothing more. The room was small, but indeed clean. A single bed, a wooden nightstand, and a tiny square window. Daisy set her bag down and stood still for a moment. She wasn't sure what this feeling was. Maybe safety? For the first time in years, she had a place to breathe without scanning for exits. A moment later, a familiar voice rang out. "Daisy!" John ran down the hallway, his backpack hanging loosely over one shoulder. "You really came!" Danny followed behind, wearing a relieved smile. "Welcome. Is the room okay?" "It's fine. I don't need much." He handed her a bag containing a bottle of water, some cash, and a sheet with bus route instructions. "This is a simple contract, nothing complicated, just so you feel at ease. There's also money for your first few days' expenses." Daisy took it but didn't open it. Everything was happening too fast. "Will you have dinner with us?" Danny asked. "I don't want to intrude." "You're not intruding. You're our guest." John immediately pulled her into the kitchen. It was bright and spotless, like something out of a TV show. Danny served alphabet soup and buttered bread. Simple, unfussy food. "You cooked?" Daisy asked. "Yes, but don't say it too loud. Margaret will get mad at me for stepping into her kitchen." John giggled, and Daisy found herself laughing too. The meal was easy and warm. The boy chattered about school, his drawings, his dream of having a dog. Daisy listened, answering now and then, realizing the boy's joy was genuine. After dinner, John went upstairs to his room, and Danny walked Daisy into the hallway. "Feel free to move around the house. If you ever feel uncomfortable, tell me. I don't want you to feel trapped." "I don't feel trapped. I'm just not sure I belong here." "John thinks you do, and so do I." Daisy didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded and went to her room. For the first time in years, she cried, not from sadness or happiness, but from fear. Fear that this home, this feeling of safety, could disappear at any moment. But before she fell asleep, she made herself a promise. She wouldn't run away again. In the first few days, Daisy kept to herself. She woke up early, splashed her face with cold water, never stepped upstairs, never opened the fridge without permission. She helped John get dressed, walked him to school, then spent her time reading an old book or offering to mop the floor if Margaret allowed it. Margaret didn't say much, but her eyes were always watching. Danny was gone most of the day. He only returned in the evenings to have dinner with John. He didn't ask many questions about Daisy's past, only the occasional, "Are you doing okay?" And Daisy always replied, "I'm fine." John was different. He clung to her like a shadow. After school, he'd burst into the kitchen yelling, "Guess what? I drew a dinosaur today." Or, "Tell me that story from yesterday again." Daisy didn't understand why the boy liked her so much. But every time he laughed, her fear faded a little more. One afternoon, John handed her a crumpled drawing. 3 stick figures stood side by side, holding hands. John, Danny, and a messy-haired woman in a hoodie. That was her. At the bottom, he had scribbled one word in big, shaky letters. Family. One rainy Friday afternoon, Daisy and John had just arrived home when they spotted a red convertible parked right in front of the house. A woman stepped out, her golden blonde hair gleaming, her tight dress hugging every curve, and her high heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. She didn't ring the bell, but opened the door and walked in as if she owned the place. "Danny!" Her voice echoed through the hall. John frowned and whispered to Daisy, "It's Rose." Before Daisy could ask, Danny appeared from his office, his expression not exactly pleased. "Rose, what are you doing here?" "I just got back from Madrid and wanted to see you, and John." She glanced at Daisy, her eyes sweeping from head to toe with open judgment. "And this is?" "This is Daisy," Danny said slowly. "She looks after John in the afternoons." "Oh," Rose's lips curled. "Didn't expect you to hire this type." Daisy heard it clearly, but didn't react. John's grip on her hand tightened. "Rose," Danny warned in a low voice, "Daisy is John's friend." "Friend?" Rose gave a soft laugh. "Sure, you've always been generous with special cases." The air grew tense. Margaret stepped out from the kitchen carrying a tray of pastries, but her eyes also flicked toward Daisy with caution. "I'll go upstairs," Daisy said, intending to lead John away. But John protested immediately. "No, I want Daisy to stay here." Rose tilted her head. "How sweet. But John, Aunt Rose knows a lot more games than she does." "No!" John shouted, then turned to Danny. "I don't like her." Rose froze for a moment, but quickly covered it with a forced smile. Children can be so blunt sometimes. Danny signaled Daisy to take John upstairs. She obeyed, but just before turning into the hallway, she caught Rose murmuring, "You can't let someone like that be near your son." Daisy walked faster, her chest burning. Upstairs, John tossed his backpack onto a chair, his face flushed. "I hate her. She always looks at me like I'm a stray dog." Daisy sat beside him, rubbing his back. "Some people are unpleasant, but we don't have to let them make us sad." "But what if Dad listens to her? Will you leave?" Daisy was silent for a moment, then smiled. "I won't go anywhere as long as you still want me here." John hugged her so tightly that Daisy felt an unspoken promise pass between them, not to Danny, but to this boy. 2 days later, the atmosphere in the house had completely changed. Rose began showing up almost every day, always wearing a sweet smile in front of Danny, but revealing a cold, cutting look whenever it was just her and Daisy. On Tuesday afternoon, Daisy picked John up from school, and as soon as they stepped inside, she saw Rose sitting at the dining table with some of John's toys in front of her. "Hello, Daisy, isn't it?" Her voice dripped with sweetness. Daisy gave a small nod and led John into the kitchen. But when she opened the cupboard to get some water, she noticed several glass cups shattered in the trash bin. Margaret stood nearby, shaking her head. "She dropped them and said it was you, earlier this morning when I came downstairs for something." Daisy frowned. "But I was at the park this morning." Margaret only shrugged. "I'm just telling you what I heard, not what I said." Daisy knew this wasn't going to be simple. The next afternoon, a gold bracelet that had belonged to Danny's mother, the one that was always kept in the glass cabinet in the living room, suddenly went missing. Rose was the first to notice and exclaimed, "Danny, your mother's bracelet is gone." Danny walked out, brows drawn together. "Are you sure? Maybe it was put somewhere else." "No, it was here this morning, and I saw Daisy walk past the cabinet," Rose said, her voice heavy with implication. Daisy was standing right at the kitchen doorway and heard every word. Her face burned as she stepped straight in. "You think I took it?" "I didn't say that," Danny replied. "But she did," Daisy shot back, pointing directly at Rose. "I don't need anything from anyone, especially not from the person who's given me food and a place to stay." Rose gave a slight laugh. "Calm down, I'm just saying what I saw." "No, you're making things up," Daisy replied, her eyes locked on hers. John came running down from upstairs, catching only part of the exchange, but shouting immediately, "It wasn't Daisy, I was with her all afternoon." Danny raised a hand for silence. He walked over to the cabinet, crouched down, and there it was, the bracelet wedged deep in a corner, fallen to the wooden floor. He picked it up and handed it to Rose. "Looks like it just slipped down. Next time, don't be so quick to jump to conclusions." Rose's face paled slightly, but she forced a smile. "I was only worried about you." "Thanks, but don't worry too much," Danny said, his voice noticeably colder. When Rose finally left, Danny found Daisy in the kitchen. "I'm sorry for letting her say that to you." "It's fine. I'm used to it," she said, though her voice betrayed the hurt. "Don't get used to being suspected," he said, meeting her gaze. "I trust you, and so does John. That's what matters." Daisy looked down, pretending to rearrange the plates on the table to hide her emotions. His words seemed simple, but to her they carried the weight of a vow to protect. That night, when Daisy went up to her room, she found a small paper bag outside her door. Inside was a new notebook, a pen, and a folded piece of paper that read, "Don't let anyone make you think you don't deserve to be here." There was no signature, but she knew exactly who had left it. A week later, Rose returned in the afternoon while Danny was still out. She came carrying a bag of pastries, smiling brightly as she stepped into the kitchen where Daisy was slicing fruit for John. Good boy. Come here to Aunt Rose. I brought you some cake." John shook his head. "I want to stay with Daisy." Rose still bent down and whispered, "I'll give you cake if you tell your dad that Daisy left you alone in the park." John's eyes widened. "But Daisy never did that." "Just say it. It's fine." Her voice low but icy. From the counter, Daisy heard it clearly. She set the knife down and walked over. "Don't teach him to lie." Rose straightened, lips curling. "You misunderstood. I was only joking." "Don't joke like that. To me, John is not a tool." Rose gave a thin smile and turned on her heel, leaving the kitchen. But that evening, when Danny came home, she was already seated in the living room, eyes glistening with tears. "Danny, I just heard John say that Daisy left him alone in the park so she could talk to a strange man." Danny frowned and looked at Daisy, clearly unsettled. "John, what's this about?" "No, Daisy's always with me. Rose is lying," John shouted, eyes brimming. Daisy stood tall, her voice calm but trembling slightly. "Who do you believe, Danny? Your son or her?" Rose cut in. "I just thought you should know, to protect John." "Protect him from who?" Danny's voice turned to steel. "From someone who's spent her time playing with him, making him laugh, earning his trust, or from someone who only shows up to plant seeds of doubt?" Rose froze. He went on. "I stayed silent when you mocked her. I overlooked it when you made up the bracelet story. But this time, you've gone too far." She tried to keep her composure. "You're choosing her over me?" "No, I'm choosing the truth and my son's peace of mind." Rose pressed her lips together, stood, slung her bag over her shoulder, and strode toward the door, her heels striking the floor hard. When the door shut, Danny turned to Daisy and John. "I'm sorry. I should have put an end to this much sooner." John immediately wrapped his arms tightly around Daisy, as if afraid she might disappear. Daisy hugged him back, one arm around the boy, the other gripping the fabric on his shoulder, feeling for the first time that she truly belonged here. Danny stood there in silence, watching them, and in his eyes, the unspoken thank you was clearer than any words. In the days that followed, Danny deliberately arranged his schedule to spend more time at home. In the mornings, when Daisy was preparing breakfast for John, he would appear in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, asking a few questions about her plans for the day. In the afternoons, he sometimes joined Daisy to pick John up from school, claiming he wanted a change of scenery. But in truth, it was just an excuse to walk beside her. One weekend evening, John went to bed early after a day of running and playing in the park. Danny knocked lightly on Daisy's door. "Want to come out to the balcony and watch the moon?" She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The balcony opened to a clear night sky, the moonlight spilling over the rooftops of the old houses. Danny poured her a glass of wine while he drank coffee. They talked about everything, from their favorite books to the cities they longed to visit. When Daisy shared her childhood dream of becoming a photographer, Danny was silent for a moment before saying, "You still can. All you need is to want it." She smiled faintly. "Life isn't that simple." "True, but sometimes the hardest thing is just deciding to start." Their eyes met and lingered longer than usual. A soft breeze drifted past, and a strand of Daisy's hair brushed against his hand. Danny didn't pull away, and he didn't speak, but in that silence there was more than any spoken confession. Then the turning point came, on an afternoon that had seemed perfectly ordinary. That morning, Daisy was hand-washing a few T-shirts in the backyard. She didn't dare use the washing machine. Margaret hadn't said she could. The air was cold, the water colder, but she didn't mind. It gave her something she could still control. A soft whistle broke the silence from the other side of the wooden fence. Daisy looked up, and her stomach dropped. A thin man stood there, wearing a faded jacket and a fraying baseball cap. His arms were covered in blurred tattoos. His smile curved like a knife. "Been a while, Daisy," he said. "You've changed." Tommy. No one else called her that way. No one else had that mix of familiarity and threat in their eyes. Daisy stepped back, clutching her wet sleeves. "What are you doing here?" "Just passing by. Wanted to see how you're living now. Nice house. Cute kid." "Don't talk about the boy." "Oh, I saw him. You look like a model mom now. Job, roof, stability. I'm happy for you." "What do you want, Tommy?" "Just a little help. Nothing big. $5,000 and I'm gone. No one needs to know anything." Daisy trembled. Her lips were pale, but her gaze was solid. "I don't have anything for you, and if you come back—" "What then?" Tommy sneered. "You think someone like you gets to threaten people? I knew you back when you were sleeping on cardboard. Remember? You owe me." "No, you're the one who sold me out." His eyes darkened, but the smile remained. "Doesn't matter. You're doing well now. Bet your wallet's got some cushion. $5,000's not much, Daisy. I'm not greedy." She didn't reply. She just stared, then turned and walked back inside. That night, she didn't eat dinner with John like usual. Her chest tightened when she heard him call, "Guess what? I solved the whole worksheet." But she couldn't bring herself to face him. She knew what had to come. The next day, Daisy packed her things, just the same small bag. Everything she could call hers fit into a few shirts and an old notebook. Danny got home late on a phone call in his office when he heard hurried footsteps on the stairs. John ran toward the door like every day, but this time there was no one waiting. Only Daisy standing by the door, bag in hand. "Where are you going?" John asked, voice rough with confusion. Daisy knelt, resting her hands on his shoulders. "I have to leave for a while, John. Just grown-up stuff." "But you'll come back, right?" She didn't promise. She couldn't. "I'll always remember you," she whispered. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." John hugged her tightly, and Danny, watching from the top of the stairs, stood frozen, not knowing what to say. The door closed, and with it, a smile disappeared from that quiet house. 3 days after Daisy left, the house felt terrifyingly quiet. John grew silent. He still sat at the table, still finished his homework, but he no longer showed off drawings or told stories after school. His eyes had gone dim. Danny noticed, and he too felt the emptiness creeping in. That night, alone in his office, Danny looked at the drawing John had once made. 3 figures, John, himself, and Daisy, holding hands. Below it, scribbled in colored marker, "Family." He exhaled deeply, stood up. If he didn't go after her, he knew he'd never forgive himself. The next morning, Danny drove across familiar streets, searching near the park where they'd first met. He checked shelters and food stations. Most people didn't recognize the name, until one young woman at a food pantry said quietly, "There was a girl named Daisy, said she just got a job at a small diner 2 blocks over." Without thinking, Danny drove straight there. A worn-out place with dull yellow lighting and a chalkboard menu. He stepped inside and immediately spotted her. Daisy was wiping a table in the back, her back to the door. That messy hair, that familiar, fragile frame. Before he could speak, a small voice broke through. "Miss Daisy!" John had already bolted from the car, running straight into her arms. She turned, and when her eyes met his, the rag in her hands dropped to the floor. She dropped to her knees and hugged him tightly, tears already streaming. "I missed you," John said, voice breaking. Danny walked closer. Daisy looked up at him, eyes swollen with emotion. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know I shouldn't have left like that." Danny's jaw tightened. "Why did you? You didn't say a word, not even goodbye." She was quiet for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Someone from my past showed up," she said. "His name is Tommy. We used to be on the streets together. He threatened me. And John, too, said he'd hurt us if I didn't give him money." Danny frowned. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was scared. I thought you'd ask me to leave. I thought John would get caught up in the mess I came from. I figured leaving was the only way to keep you both safe." He said nothing. John clung to her, still refusing to let go. "You shouldn't have had to deal with that alone," Danny said gently. "We didn't want you to go, especially not John." "But—" "No buts," his voice was firm. "I trust you. John trusts you, and we're not going to let that person come back again." Daisy looked at him, unable to find the words. For the first time in many years, she felt the weight she'd been carrying was finally being shared. Danny stood up and draped his coat over her shoulders. "Come on, let's go home. That's where you belong." When they stepped out of the cafe, the rain had stopped. The streets glistened under the glow of the streetlights, and Daisy realized sometimes to find a new beginning, you have to dare to let someone see the deepest wounds you carry. The very next day, Danny called a close friend who worked in law. Within just a few hours, they had gathered enough evidence to prove that the man had repeatedly blackmailed and threatened others. That evening, Danny and Daisy went to the police station together. When the man was brought into the interrogation room, he glared at them, but his earlier confidence was gone. Danny simply said, "This game is over." As they left the station, Daisy took a deep breath, as if a massive weight had been lifted from her chest. "I don't even know how to thank you." "Don't thank me, just stay," Danny replied, his gaze warm but resolute. From that day on, no one bothered them again. John seemed to sense the new peace in the air. He ran around the house, constantly pulling Daisy into his silly games. One night, after John had gone to bed, Danny invited Daisy out to the balcony. The city sparkled below, the breeze carrying a faint scent of flowers. "I've been thinking a lot," he began. "About you, about John, and about us." Daisy looked at him, her heart beating faster. "I don't want you to just be John's nanny. I want you to be part of this family. Forever." Daisy froze, her eyes welling up. "Danny? I can't promise it will always be easy, but I promise to protect you and love you no matter what happens." She didn't answer with words. Instead, Daisy stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. The embrace was no longer cautious. It was complete, as if both had finally found where they belonged. Inside, John woke up in the middle of the night and saw them standing close together on the balcony. He smiled softly before going back to bed. He knew his family was finally whole. 6 months later, spring had arrived, and the garden behind the house was filled with blooming flowers. Daisy was arranging bright yellow tulips into a ceramic vase with John when Danny stepped outside, one hand hidden behind his back. He wore a crisp white shirt, his warm smile touched with a hint of nervousness. "What's going on?" Daisy asked, looking up. "I want the two of you to come out to the garden for a moment," he said, his eyes flicking between her and John. When they stepped into a sunlit patch of the yard, Daisy froze. In front of her was a small table, covered with a white cloth, topped with a bouquet of white roses, mingled with soft pink ones. Danny knelt down on one knee and opened a blue velvet box. Inside was a simple yet elegant platinum ring, the small diamond catching the sunlight in a delicate sparkle. "Daisy, these past 6 months you've given me and John a happiness I thought I'd never have again. I don't want to just call you my companion or John's nanny. I want to call you my wife." Daisy raised a hand to her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. John stood beside her, his eyes shining. "Daisy, marry my dad." She laughed through her tears and nodded eagerly. "Yes, I will." Danny slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled both Daisy and John into his arms. The three of them stood in the sun-drenched garden, as if every wound and every fear had vanished, leaving only a new family, bound together and full of hope for the future.